On behalf of Mayor and Council, we want to wish you
a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
Good evening, Garden City. I'd like to call to order a regular scheduled council meeting for Monday, December 16th at 7 p.m. Our first order of business is our opening ceremony. It consists of the national anthem, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence for those service members that have given their lives while defending our country. Could everybody please stand? Thank you. Please be seated. Mr. Miller, can you take the roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Walker.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kerwin.
Here.
Councilmember Squires.
Here.
Councilmember DeMichael.
Here.
Councilmember Earl.
Here.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Here.
Councilmember Lynch.
Here.
Okay. Moving on to item 4, approval of the agenda as presented.
Mayor,
Councilmember Lynch.
I move for the approval of the agenda for Monday, December 16, 2019, as presented.
Support.
Support from Councilmember Squires. Any comments from the table? From the general public? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. This time, we'll move on to item 5, recognition. If I could have Mr. and Mrs. Boyce and their daughter Debbie up to the podium, please. For those of you who don't know, this is Mr. and Mrs. Boyce. They own that beautiful decorated house on Maplewood across from Douglas Elementary, and they've decorated it every year for 60 years. I can remember in the 60s, late 67, 68, my parents driving around the city with us kids in the Country Squire station wagon with the wood on the side, looking at all the decorated houses, and we always drove by your house. So since they've decorated for 60 years, we wanted to honor them tonight. And I have this plaque that says, "Thank you, Boyce family. In recognition of your family and your dedication to the holiday season, the City Council of Garden City offers you a great thank you. The annual decoration of your home has brought joy to countless children and families for the last 60 years. The City Council recognizes you for being a bright light in the community every year, and to say that your positive contribution to the city will be remembered for many years to come." Dated December 16th, 2019, and it has the picture of their house on it, all decorated.
Thank you so much.
center. We do a photo op, council. Next, I'm going to call up Kim Dole, DDA Director. Oh, I'm sorry. John Prosh, Chairman. What's that? You want to do it? You can do it here. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, council. We represent the Downtown Development Authority, and we just recently had the chili cook-off, and if you're from town, you probably know about that because it's a fantastic event. It brings a lot of people. I think it's our biggest attended event for the year. So really quick, I wanted to run down some sponsorships that we had for the event. Our big sponsors include Corporate Graphics, the Bucelli Group, Garden City Pawn, Slipknot, Hennessy Engineers, Morrison Animal Clinic, Public Service Credit Union, Power Home Remodeling, Don Nicholson Enterprises, Bath Planet, and the Yaldo Eye Center. And then we have quite a few other sponsors as well. Through the event, as we do the charity donations, we had quite a few donations that we made to the Straight Farmhouse, Home Pantry, Project Grad, the Goodfellows, Bed Bark and Beyond, the Detroit Animal Care and Control, Last Day Dog Rescue, the Kiwanis Group, and Autos for Autism. And then we're here to present checks to our top 3 charity donations tonight. And the total number of charity amount that we paid out was $13,410. So we're very excited about that. So we have representatives from Home Pantry, United Needy, and the Goodfellows Group here tonight. We'll be presenting checks to them each for $3,500. You guys could come up, please.
Do the photo op in the center with the check.
Yeah, great.
Do that.
Pat Rybeck is here from our home pantry. We're going to move everybody to the middle. And Marge Hickman here representing Garden City Goodfellows. And Jamie Bacascio representing United Needy Family.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I also wanted to take a moment to say, as far as the Garden City Goodfellows go, I wanted to, we did Shop with a Hero through Meyer last week, and I wanted to recognize the officers that came out and helped the Goodfellows. John was messing with my paperwork. So police officers Shippey and Rudy, of course, Officer Proctor, Officer Stanley, Officer Drinkard, Officer Warner, Streifel, Officer Smith, Weiss, Perrin, and firefighter Bernhardt all came out, and they helped a dozen of our own Garden City children go shopping. Meyer gave each child a $125 gift card. And then they also helped a couple of youngsters from Redford that didn't have a hero handy at the moment, so they took them out, and Garden City Goodfellows truly appreciates their help in doing that. The kids love it, so thank you very much to them. And Chief Harmon, Chief Gibbons, thank you.
Okay, next, we'll move on to item 6, comments from state and county officials. Is there anybody here tonight that wants to speak from the state or the county? This Oscar from Rashida Tlaib's office.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and good folks of Garden City. I'll just make a quick announcement for the holidays. First of all, happy holidays to everyone out here. Our hours are going to be the same, but our staff is going to be light. So if folks want to reach our office and leave a message, we'll make sure by the end of the day somebody gives you a call. But our office will be a little bit light during the holiday season. But other than that, I have nothing else.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays, folks.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, we have a presentation, our road construction update from our city manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor. As we've discussed many times here in the city of Garden City, we have about 100 miles in roadway, and probably about 80 miles needs to be replaced. Well, the road bond that was passed was able to help about 15 miles of roads, and as you'll see as we go through some of these slides, we're going to be doing a little more than that in the end. So to give you a quick look at where we are right now, what was done here at the end of 2019. On the screen is a map of the roads that were completed this past summer, spring, and fall. While there's still a few punch list items that we have to finish up, most of it is done, and a lot of it across the city really shows some good production. Now, it may be tough to see on the screen a little bit, but if you look in the bottom right corner, and I believe the council has a handout if you want to look at your close-up there, the blue lines, and I'll talk about each of these techniques in a minute as we look at the 2020 roads, but the blue lines are areas where concrete sectioning took place this past summer. Red lines are roads that are fully reconstructed with concrete. Green lines are roads that were reconstructed with new asphalt. The pink line is a mill and fill road, while the yellow road indicates chip sealing technique. The purple lines indicate joint and crack sealing, and the peach color is for the roads that were just straight spray patched. Now, unlike the past, when the city was only able to fund the reconstruction of one road at a time, we learned a lot this past year. Because we were doing so many roads at one time, we realized which companies may be better than others for what construction technique, as well as establishing better timelines and punch list completion dates. So working on so many roads really gave us a good lesson for us into the future. So we cannot thank the residents enough for a lot of them for their patience as we're going through this process. So we're better off going into the second year. Now, as far as this year's roads are concerned, I want to break out each of the roads by their construction technique. So the first is the concrete road map. So as you'll see on the screen now, it indicates roads that are going to be reconstructed 2020 fully in concrete. There's 3 roads that will be fully reconstructed with concrete, and that includes Fairfield, Cardwell, and Gilman. Now this past year, and there's the breakdown of street to street also besides the map. This past year we utilized 2 concrete companies to reconstruct our concrete roads. One of them was outstanding, so we plan to use them again this year. The other company was not as successful, and we do not plan on using them again. Which is what we learned when we went through the first year. We talked about we'll use several different contractors to do different projects, and we'll find out who's a little more up to snuff than the others. So on the map on the screen now indicates the asphalt roads that'll be reconstructed in 2020. Now I'm going to break this out into 2 slides in a moment, but right now that's gives you a quick look at what we're doing in unlike concrete, this is full redepth asphalt reclamation, where you're actually ripping the streets up and going back to the base and then recovering them. So the 7 roads you're looking at there, Arcola, Bridge, Windsor, Pardo, Donnelly, Roslyn, and Hubbard. Now, on that map, as we'll go back to in a moment, we also list some half-block roads. What we found out that there's a number of roads just off of the main road, say Ford, you make a right on Schuman from Ford going south. It's really just that first half a block is really chewed up, and then the road itself isn't too bad after that. So we're including this as part of the asphalt roads rather than full-length roads, so we're calling them half blocks. They're not necessarily all half blocks, but those roads, again, are Schuman, Cadillac, Craig, 3 parts of Muller, Cambridge, Belton, and Garden. Now, as I go back to that original asphalt map that I just showed a moment ago, I highlighted in red some of those little half-block spots. And you can see a number of them are right off of Ford in the western area of the community. And if you drive by those, go through tonight, this weekend or so, you'll notice that it's, for some reason, it's just chewed up in that one section. So we can do some work there, which gives some life to those roads to last a little longer. So repairing some of those short blocks will help us out and actually make the community a little more appealing as people drive down some of those roads and don't have to bump through the first half a block or so. So the map on the screen now will indicate 2 roads that will be resurfaced this spring with asphalt. Now, unlike our regular asphalt roads where we fully rebuild them, including the base, These two roads will be milled down a couple of inches, and the new asphalt will be put on top. So this is called mill and fill. There's two roads that we're looking at. This is a less expensive option for some of the asphalt roads. The problem is some of our asphalt roads are so bad that you really can't mill and fill. And when I say some of them, I mean pretty much all of them. Because if you go down 1 or 2 inches, there won't be anything left anyway at this point. But these are two roads that we've declared they have the ability to knock down a couple inches and then rebuild up, which is a lot cheaper because you're not going to the base and having to redo the base. So those two roads are Birch Lawn and Crowder. Now, in this next map, it gives you an idea of what we're looking for the sectioning, concrete sectioning technique that we're doing this spring and summer. Now, unlike the other fully rebuilt concrete roads, these roads will only be sectioned. And this process allows us to reconstruct a road in the areas that are most needed, as opposed to replacing the whole road at 10 times the cost. So you could be looking at $50,000 to $100,000 on a concrete road to save, as opposed to $1 million to reconstruct that whole road. So the 6 roads that we are concrete sectioning this year are looking at Rush, Henry Ruff, Florence, Bach, Hubbard, and Marquette. And this will be completed by the same concrete company that we used this past year that we felt were successful. We had 2 concrete companies this year, as I mentioned earlier, so in case anybody says they weren't too excited about the one concrete company, well, they're not coming back, so we're good. The chip seal map on the screen now is the road construction technique that's allowing us to resurface roads that really would never be on the construction list. That's an issue we have at this point. A lot of our roads are at a point where they're substandard, but they're not enough to where we can spend $1 million on replacing them. They're not in that bad a shape, but they will be over time. So we've talked about this technique before, and we're going to be doing a little more of it this next spring. So these are roads that don't need necessarily major work, but certainly can be salvageable. If we do not do something soon, they will get worse over time and cost a lot more. So you'll see some of those roads around the city. Now, the benefit of that chip seal also is covering the road itself, getting back in a good shape condition. We can come back with an asphalt cover right over the top of it, and we're looking at that a little bit for Hartel and Garden, just north of Ford, where we may be able to come in just with a quick cover. That's a hot spot right up to the high school, more of a heavily trafficked road, and that could be a very small cost of putting a layer of asphalt on top now that's already been sealed properly with the chip seal. Before that, the road was like a mini Vietnam, landmines all over the place to avoid destroying your car. So we're looking at that as far as another step possibly on some of our chip seal roads. And that the list is too much as far as listing all the chip seal roads, but here we're looking at the roads. This is the 2020 roadmap right now, the ones that I just talked about, all of them, all the techniques onto one map itself. Gives a full overview. The staff feels pretty confident that we'll be successful in completing these listed roads for 2020. Now, the last slide I want to show here is what we're expecting to look at by this time next year. We should be able to pull out the same slide. So the map indicates that you're looking at now on the screen that all roads will be completed from this past year and next year. That's what it should look like. So the first 2 years of the Garden City Road Bond is looking to prove to be pretty productive. And then after the new year and into February, this year we'll be bringing back some of these road construction bids back to City Council, for final approval. So at that time, we'll be discussing some of these projects in a little more detail. But again, that map, for being 2 years of the 5-year plan, I think looks pretty impressive. And with that, I yield back my time to the mayor.
Thank you. Good update. We're making progress on the roads as promised. Okay, moving on, I'm going to bring up the police chief. He's going to discuss 2019 code enforcement summary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Yes, this will dovetail nicely. It also goes towards just improving the community we live in. So I just want to give an update. So what we've been up to since code enforcement has moved over to the police department. This is pretty much a brief overview presentation, but I've also provided a more in-depth report attached to this. If you have more questions, though, please feel free to contact me. First, to start with, overall at the police department, our philosophy, and it always has been, and it began certainly with Chief Murray, is that we're policing with a focus on the quality of life. Reduce crime, improve traffic flow, eliminate blight. It's no secret that fighting blight is a good thing. Dangerous buildings, abandoned structures, litter, overgrown weeds, lower our property values, they increase crime, and detract in every way from the well-being of the community. And that's not me saying it, that's the Michigan Municipal League. So with that philosophy in mind, in 2018, code enforcement moved from the Department of Public Services over to the police department. This is how it operated prior to coming over to the police department. Communication. Complaints were made largely taken via voicemail. That's because there was one code enforcement officer that comprised of the entire staffing of the department. He needed to spend his time out on the road, addressing complaints, being proactive, going to court, filing reports. So if you called the ordinance department, you would get a voicemail. The code enforcement officer would attempt to call you back in a timely fashion based on his workload. Time was an issue. One person doing all the record keeping, doing all the enforcement, doing all the communications. Record keeping was done all by the lone code enforcement officer, and we utilized misdemeanors as our primary enforcement mechanism, 90-day misdemeanors, meaning that if you were ticketed and found guilty of having high grass or a nuisance, you could face 90 days in jail. This triggered a lot of legal process. And lastly, data collection. One person with a heavy workload, data collection fell by the wayside. These were the consistent complaints we heard when we took over. Communication. Residents became frustrated trying to make complaints or check on progress with code enforcement. I don't know if you've ever called a business trying to get something done and you go through a prompt system to leave a voicemail and then someone tries to call you back. Or if you've ever just tried to call someone back and you guys play that voicemail tag game, that can be quite frustrating for someone's interaction with the government, especially when they're frustrated about an issue. Time. The code enforcement officer was just working hard, and it became difficult to keep up with all the workload that was being pushed upon him. And there was a protracted legal process due to our use of misdemeanors. To put someone in jail takes a lot of legal process, so that when you go to court, it's not just one court date, it's not 2 court dates. It could be 6-7 months before there's a resolution. So this became our goals when we took over. We wanted improved communication, we wanted improved documentation, record keeping, and we wanted an effective, timely, efficient process. So this is what we added, thanks to council. We added a part-time clerk who handles all communications. We added a part-time code enforcement officer to assist with proactive enforcement and responding to complaints, to give our ordinance officer, who's professionally trained, to actually start really utilizing the talents and skills he has. Record and data keeping was overseen now by a police sergeant. There's so much in common by the way we respond to ordinance complaints in the way we respond to police complaints. So what we did was utilize a very similar filing and tracking system for complaints to make sure we're documenting everything we do and to make sure that we're following the proper legal process and make sure things are being addressed. Municipal civil infractions, council wisely amended municipal civil infractions. So now it's more like a traffic ticket, and it has that sort of expedience in court. It really only takes one informal hearing to find someone responsible now for an ordinance violation. The person's not facing jail time, they're facing a fine. However, it also comes with that is the ability for the judge to abate the nuisance. The judge can actually order from the bench, a power he did not have before this, to actually say, cut your grass, impound your car, fix the property. So this became our method with those tools in hand. First, we seek to educate. We want to educate the public, we want to educate our businesses and our property owners about the ordinances and how blight negatively impacts us. And that's what we've been doing. We want to communicate and cooperate with our people. We're not just going to run out and issue a ticket. We're going to communicate with the property owner. And so hopefully, and the 9 times out of 10, this is what they do. They resolve the problem when we communicate with them. And we now have a consistent process. So when you call code enforcement, you'll speak to a live person. They'll be able to answer your questions, answer your problem, and let you know that they're going to be addressing your problem and how we do it. We're also going to be tracking that complaint because we have a clerk who can file, record, and add the necessary stuff, and then keep our ordinance officers in the field. They're going to have more time now. They do have more time now, and we're seeing the positive benefits. Record keeping done by the clerk, overseen by our sergeant, making sure we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's. So if we're facing any litigation in regards to code enforcement, we have a consistent record keeping process. Municipal civil infractions, as I said, much faster, speedier court process, and data, we're actually starting to track data. And on that note, this will really hammer home the fact that we had one person in code enforcement. So over a 4-month period, we tracked our phone calls and we tracked our walk-ups to the desk. We're still tracking them, but this was during a time when we wanted to know how much are we dealing with. 21 phone calls per day, 1,519 during that 4-month period. 5.5 walk-ups per day to a front desk that actually didn't exist before. People actually come in and right to the desk to either resolve their complaint or deal with it or lodge one. So we're talking about 26.5 average complaints per day that the ordinance officer before was receiving through voicemail, having to call those people back, and still have been expected to do proactive enforcement and do those things. Well, now we've got a clerk handling that, and our complaints on communication have dropped to near zero. We don't get many complaints about people not getting back to people, and actually, we get a lot more compliments about the timeliness in which we're taking care of it. Our enforcement actions in 2019, 1,772 new enforcement actions, that's 13 per day. We wrote 600 municipal civil infractions, totaling over $80,000 in fines. And it also enlarged our ability just to do bigger things. In 2018, we did a big ordinance push. We combined police officers, a number of police officers in 1 week with our ordinance officers and their specialties, and they pointed us in the right direction. And we put notices on homes and we impounded cars. 352 notices on homes and 100 abandoned and disabled vehicles removed from the street. In 2018 into 2019, we began a campaign to educate our commercial properties about the problems with blight and what we'd like to see done. And this is where really freeing up our code enforcement officer to do, he's a trained building official, to go out and communicate, and he's done a fantastic job, and I think he should be commended, especially when we start looking at the pictures and looking at all the facade improvements going on throughout town. He's been going door to door and informing people, hey, this is our business owners, this is what we're looking for, let's all get on the same page. Those that had code violations, most of which repair just from a conversation from him, and he's got the time to make that face-to-face interaction. So what we're learning is when we get in a time where we have to make decisions on where to cut people and stuff like that, I think what we should take from this is that when you support ordinance enforcement, probably sometimes in our lower financial times, are sometimes the most important times to have those people in place, because we've had a lot of catch-up to do on fighting blight, but we're doing it. And I've got a number of pictures, and please, when you see these properties, not necessarily did they get a violation or whatever, sometimes it was just a conversation and they fixed it and remedied it on their own. Some was just a letter they received. But Papa Elias, you can see the difference. Brand new brick facade. These are people we've been in communication with. Catholic Church Supply. One conversation with them about the exterior, just specifically about the awning. They redid their whole front of their building. One of our other big pushes was auto repair lots. We felt that way too often auto repair lots get packed with cars, debris, junk. It lowered the overall aesthetics. We sent out letters. We made visits. Ordinance Officer, Code Enforcement Officer DeMichael spent a lot of time working on these. Here's one. You can see the difference, 2017 to 2019. A1 transmission. You can almost see it out the window if it wasn't dark. 2016 to 2019, a marked difference. The lot behind that, marked difference. Debris, abandoned car, broken down fence, all cleaned up. The front facade of some of our Ford Road businesses. And these are the things everyone's seeing. You know, Ford and Middlebelt is one of the most traveled intersections in the state. So now when people come through Garden City, because of the efforts specifically of Ordinance Officer, or Code Enforcement Officer DeMichael, they look at the facade of this business, and it's much more impressive. Residential properties, I mean, pools like this are now getting covered. It looks a lot better. Weeds are getting cut down. And then last, I'll finish on this one, and it sort of hammers home the point. This was a property over on Beechwood that we've had some contact with. It's an unoccupied home for a number of years. And you can see there's a tree growing through a truck in the driveway. We were able to get the truck out. We were able to get them to skirt the trees, do a lot of impressive work, and now look, there's a for sale sign out there. And that's the kind of growth and things we're looking for. So I'm just here today to kind of sum up what we've done. I really want to compliment the staff, Kelly Kovac, Ordinance Officer DeMichael, Redmond. They've done a fantastic job. And to really compliment Angelo, you see what happens when you give a person the time to do their job and do it well, because that's what he should be doing, and that's what he is out there doing. And then thank you guys for the support, and realize this. I know we're going to consistently have ordinance issues. That's just there's going to be car accidents. There's going to be larceny from autos. Those things do happen. What we're trying to do is lower the number and really increase our responsiveness. And what I found is when a citizen or a council member or the city manager asks me about a particular property, what I'm telling them when they say, hey, what's going on with this place? I'm not saying is you're not telling us before we already know. What I'm getting a lot is, hey, what's going on with this? And I can just within 5 minutes know, because I talked to Officer DeMichael, and he can tell me, yep, this is what we're doing with this, and this. So we're already ahead of the game, and that gives me a great feeling as chief. So I really appreciate their efforts, and I appreciate your support, and I'd gladly answer any questions.
Chief, I just want to say thank you. We've said all along, you fight blight, you make the community look better.
Absolutely.
We're fixing our roads, we're fighting blight. It's going to increase property values. It's a win-win for the residents, so, and for the city. So thank you for the great work you do. And
I know I'm biased, but
Officer DeMichael and Officer Redmond.
I know I'm biased, but driving around town, I've done it for, getting on 20 years, and I did notice the difference is marked, and I appreciate the work of our code enforcement officer.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything? Thank you. Okay, next, we have another presentation from the DDA. The chairman, Mr. John Prosh.
Good evening, council and mayor. I'm here on behalf of the Garden City DDA tonight to just give the council and the general public an overview of what the DDA is and what the DDA does. It is required now, as of 2018, through Public Act 57 for us to do so. We do this in obviously to stay within the guidelines, but also to educate people on what we do. So our job is to grow the downtown development area economically, physically, visually, to enhance everything, right? From business side to residential side. And people always ask, where does our money come from? So it comes from what we call TIF, which is a mechanism that stands for tax increment financing. So the DDA was started back in 1984. And at that time, you have what is a base level of property tax. And over the years, that property tax increases. The difference between that base level and the increase is the captured amount of money that is used to finance the DDA. So understand this, it's not an increase in taxes, and it's not a dedicated millage of any kind, okay? So that's where the money comes from. If the DDA was not part of the city, if there was no DDA, that money would not revert back to the city budget. It would not be used for anything that it's used for now. So as I go through this, I'm going to talk about things that we finance or that we pay for as the DDA through that tax increment money. If we weren't there, or the DDA wasn't there, those things wouldn't happen. Current projects that we're working on is a possibility of a downtown park or a pavilion, and we're targeting the area over where the chili cook-off is done in the old, in the Planet Fitness park, sideways to the Planet Fitness parking lot. We continue to look at property acquisition. The benefit of that is we can acquire properties and then have the possibility to enhance the property and then put it back on what we call the tax roll. If it is acquired by the DDA, it comes off the taxes. But our goal is not to, buy up properties and have them. Our goal would be to more or less flip them so that they're usable to businesses. The gateway improvements. So the gateway is what we call the Ford Road and the Middle Belt intersections. So the DDA is limited to Ford Road between Henry Ruff and Harrison, and Middle Belt between Bach and Maplewood. So those gateway areas where all the Christmas lights are and all that activity, that is all done by the DDA. Maintenance projects that we continue to work on. If you're walking in the downtown anywhere, there's some brick pavers that we installed a few years ago. Some of them need replaced, so we're looking at making sure that's done so it's safe and easy to walk through. There's screen walls all over the downtown area. We maintain those, cleaning them, replacing whatever that is. And then the trees that are between the sidewalks and the roads, those are trimmed at the DDA's request as needed in areas so that, visually, if you're pulling out onto any of those roads, you can still see, and the businesses can be still identified. We offer loan and grant programs. So an example would be you own a business in our DDA district and you want to do some type of facade improvement on your property. We offer a loan at a very low interest rate over a course of time so that you can make that possible. So we front the money, so to speak. People are able to develop a better look at their business, and then they pay back to the DDA over a few years. Parking lots, we do that as well, parking lot improvements, and then signage, so we can update signs to make sure they're in code and ordinance compliance. And then we do a grant for architectural assistance. So we have a couple of architects that are contracted that will actually do renderings of what the business will look like, the facade improvement. So the DDA has a board of directors, the trustees, and we also have a small staff. So the board of directors is comprised of mostly business owners and or property owners within the DDA. And then we have a couple of what we call residents at large. They're just residents. They're not business owners. They're not property owners. So we get the input of just resident on our board. And then we also have the mayor as our CEO. He sits in on our meetings as well. And understand that we are all volunteers. We are not paid. We are appointed by the mayor and council. We're not paid to do this. We just volunteer our time because it's in our best interest too to help keep the vitality of the city up. We do have an executive director and of the DDA that is hired. It's Kim Dold, and she has an assistant. Her name is Teresa, and they are paid by the DDA to do all the legwork, so to speak. They organize, they coordinate, they run the head on all those functions that we host. We do offer the ability for the general public to be involved. So if you're interested, if anybody's interested, it's not a full-time job. It's not anything you get paid for. It's just the good feels of giving back. So maybe you want to volunteer at one of our events, or you want to sit in on any of our meetings. They're hosted the third Tuesday of every month. Depending on the month, it might be an 8:30 a.m. meeting, or the alternate months are 5 p.m. meetings. So we try to accommodate by that. And you can call our office and get more information, and the number is 261-2830. And you can talk to either Kim or Teresa, and they can answer any questions that have to do with the DDA, our meeting schedule, or volunteering for any of our activities or our functions that we host and put on.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Anybody have anything for Mr. Prash?
Ms. Kerwin?
Sorry. I appreciate everything that you guys do down there. It makes the downtown area look very nice. This year, coming forward, though, I would really love to be a part of anything you guys have going on for the development part. Any board, any task force, I would love to get some ideas together and start figuring out how to fill the businesses down there.
Sure.
I don't know anything how to do that, but I would love to be a part of it and try to learn something from you guys, and also maybe throw out some ideas of my own.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. I'll have Ms. Dole get in touch with you. And we do have a meeting tomorrow night at 5 p.m. at the DDA office, if anybody wants to come and check it out and listen in, or offer any comments or questions that you might have further as well. Any other questions?
Councilmember Lynch?
Just tagging on Councilmember Kerwin's question, do you still put the vacant properties on the website for people that might be interested in finding a business?
Yes, that's a tough task to keep up with, but.
I understand.
Yeah, we do post the vacancies, and we also try to help fight the blight along with the PD by talking to the property owners or the business owners of the vacant properties too. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
They answered my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prash.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, we don't have any community events tonight, no petitions or communications, no public hearings. We'll move on to item 11, the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilmember Lynch.
I move for the approval of the consent agenda, items 11A, 1 through 4.
Support from Councilmember Squires. Any comment from the table? From the general public? Yes, sir.
My name's John Murray on Lather Street. Item number 2 is the full year 2020 to 2021 5-year plan. My question is that spending money? And I don't like spending it myself. But my question is I've discussed before about how we've been on a progress to where there hasn't been a recession for the last decade, and it's going to come. So I'm asking, is there a way, do you have any variables or whatever to where you may cease this back of spending the money because it may be an impact of revenue not coming in? And I think we need to look at that. And the other item we have is that if minimum wage was shot to $15 an hour, how would that impact our budget? And I think it's the February 3rd meeting, you have a budget. Is there a way you guys could put something together to sort of make me feel secure that we're not going to run into the debacle that came out of 2008?
Okay, thank you. I'm sure the city manager can address some of those during the city manager's report. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. At this time, we're going to move on to public comments for items that were not on the agenda. Anybody wishing?
Action item B, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the action items, I'm sorry. I went right past that. Item B1, sorry, hiring of the new Parks and Rec Director, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. In accordance with the city charter, I'm proud to recommend Bradley Chason to the position of Parks and Recreation Director. Bradley's born and raised in Wayne. Our neighbors here went to Wayne Memorial High School and then over to Eastern Michigan. Has his degree. He worked with Wayne Parks and Rec, Livonia Parks and Rec, Jewish Community Center, Salvation Army Kroc Center, and spent the last 7 years with the City of Canton Leisure Services Department. Through a couple of interviews, Brad really impressed the board with his knowledge of the city and passion for the industry of parks and recreation. He brought suggestions for our Parks and Rec master plan, as well as some reconstruction that we should be doing at some of our parks, which we wholeheartedly agreed. His additional experience in recreational programming and special events coordination, and his understanding that the industry works when everybody else plays, was very telling of the success that he'll bring to the department. He's also been a member of the Michigan Recreation and Parks Association for the past 12 years, and most importantly, he was an Eagle Scout. Yay. Love that. So with that, I highly recommend Bradley to the City of Garden City as its next Parks and Recreation Director.
Okay, motion's in order.
Bradley's back here in the audience.
Mayor,
Councilmember Squires.
I move to approve the hiring of Bradley Chason as the Garden City Parks and Recreation Director.
Support from Councilmember Kerwin. Before we take the vote, Bradley, you'd like to come up and just introduce yourself to the city?
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Just want to thank you guys very much for this opportunity, and look forward to getting into the job very soon and hitting the ground running.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Looking at
Welcome-
after
welcome
the
to
new
Garden
year.
City.
Starting after the new year.
Starting at the new year?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome. Let's take the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? Welcome, 7-0.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Item 2, Youth Services Contract Extension. Chief Gibbons? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This is an extension of a contract we have been a part of with the Conference of Western Wayne for approximately some 20 years. It's to provide youth assistance programming. It extends the current contract through September 30th, 2020, for a total of $113,700. It's an overall increase of $27,000 from the existing, $27,092 from the existing contract. It does change the insurance requirements, but our understanding is that we currently meet those requirements, so it should be no problem. And just to understand where this funding comes from, we receive it from the county. It's from 1/10 of the county jail millage and through the state of Michigan Child Care Funds.
Okay. Any questions? Councilmember Lynch?
I move to recommend the approval of a contract extension with the Conference of Western Wayne to provided youth services programs until September 20th, 2020.
Support.
Support from Councilmember Kerwin. Any comments from the table? From the general public? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll try this again. We'll move on to item 12, public comments for items that were not on the agenda. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium, state your name. There is a 3-minute time limit. This is your opportunity to make a comment or a statement. It is not the time to go back and forth with council members. Anybody wishing to speak? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. We have some guests in the audience here from Plant Moran, the city's auditors, Dave Helisick and Aaron. Yep.
Thank you very much. Aaron and I are happy to be here this evening to present the results of the annual financial statement audit for the City of Garden City for the year ended June 30, 2019. Aaron currently is passing out the graph package, which is one of the 3 documents we'll be covering this evening. As in the past, Aaron and I, as well as our manager, Michelle Lewis, who was unable to make it this evening, did meet with the city manager, the clerk treasurer, and the deputy treasurer to go through the financial statement in detail. So the financial statement is the large document you have. We're not going to cover that extensively tonight. There's a couple things we will point to. The majority of our presentation will be the graph package, which summarizes, for the most part, the general fund activity. What I would like to draw your attention to, though, in the financial statement is pages 1 and 2. And this is really the part of the financial statement that's truly Plant Moran's. The rest is information that we compile on behalf of the city, what it turns over for the audit. And as a result of the audit, we were able to give the financial statements an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give a set of financial statements. What that means is these statements, as presented, fairly reflect the financial position of the city as of June 30th, 2019, as well as the revenues, the expenditures, the cash flows, and the notes to the statements that are included within the document. It's the highest level of assurance that we can give a set of financial statements, and again, as part of our audit, we were happy to provide that opinion. As I said earlier, Aaron, Michelle, and I did meet with management. We went through these documents, I'll say, pretty thoroughly, addressed any questions that the city had at the time, and as a result of our draft meeting, we really didn't have any adjustments to those statements. We thought we'd cover the statements, however, as we have in the past, graphically. Aaron just passed out those graphs for you, and I believe they're going to be shown up here on the monitor as well for the folks in the audience that they can follow along. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. When Aaron's done, I will cover our required communications letter. But if you have any questions as you go along on any of the graphs, please raise your hand. We'll try to address them as we go along. And either at the end of Aaron's presentation or at the end of my presentation, if we haven't covered all your questions, we'd be happy to do so at that time.
Good evening. As Dave mentioned, in front of you is a set of graphs. We like to use a graph presentation as it allows you to see trends from each year. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The first slide we have, this shows your combined revenue for the general fund and the public safety fund. Total revenue for these two funds was about $17.3 million. This is a slight increase from 2018 by about $44,000. The city's two largest sources of revenue are property taxes and state and federal sources. Property taxes did increase about $280,000 compared to last year due to an increase in taxable value. Your state and federal sources did decrease this year about $325,000 due to reduction in grant funding. And then there was an increase in interest income due to an increase in interest rates, and then the remaining items here were pretty similar to the previous year. Moving to the next slide shows the same two funds, your general fund and the public safety fund, their combined expenditures. Total expenditures were about $17.3 million. This is an increase about $1.5 million compared to 2018. There were several areas that had increases during the year, the largest being public service, public safety, and general government. All three of these areas had an increase in personnel costs during the year. The public safety had an increase in dispatch services this year, and then the public works department had an increase in capital outlay due to some renovations around the city. And then the next slide here just shows the relationship between the revenue and the expenditures that we touched on the previous two slides, with the revenue shown with the blue bar and then yellow showing the expenditures. As you can see, each of the previous years, the revenue has exceeded expenditures, which allowed unassigned fund balance, which is represented by the red line going through the graph, to continue to increase. This year, revenue and expenditures were almost break even, and unassigned fund balance did decrease about $23,000. The next slide shows total fund balance, which is broken into two categories here, unassigned and non-spendable. Total fund balance was about $7.5 million, which increased just slightly from last year, about $23,000. The first segment of that at the bottom is your non-spendable fund balance, and this is just fund balance that is in a non-spendable form and includes your prepaids. And then the remaining balance is what's available for any purpose the city chooses, and is at about $7.1 million. Does anybody have any questions on those slides that we've covered? Okay. Then the last set of graphs we have here show some activity for the water and sewer fund of the city, showing revenue and expenses here. Operating revenue decreased compared to the prior year about $298,000 based on a decrease in usage billed this year. And then your operating expenses decreased about $1.5 million. This decrease is mostly due to a reduction in expenses in the water and sewer fund related to the allocated portion of the OPEB liability. A reduction in that also offset your expenses. And then the last slide is just a picture of your working capital. And working capital is just a good measure about how the fund's ability is to meet short-term obligations using short-term assets. So the working capital is calculated here, your current assets, net of your customer receivables, as that's usually a consistently large balance. So that your current assets net of that receivable less your current liabilities. And as you can see, that working capital has decreased over the year, but that's as the city's planned, as improvements are being made to the department and to the water and sewer lines. But at $6.6 million, that's still a very healthy working capital in your water and sewer fund. And that takes care of the graphs. If anybody has any questions, I'll turn it back over to Dave and he'll cover the letter.
Okay. Looks like we're in pretty good position.
Yeah, I'm always cautious when we say that, only because you never know what's going to happen next. But when you take a look at where you thought you'd be and where you are, and I have a pretty long history with the city and where you once were, it's a good time to be in Garden City. I'll kind of leave it at that.
Thank you.
I do want to finish with a required communication to those charged with governance. So under the auditing standards, we do have communications we're required to make. We've listed them out in two different sections. The third section is not a required communication, but it's information that we just like to pass along, that we kind of accumulate either legislatively or some upcoming standards that we feel that City Council would be intrigued and be interested to know. We're not going to cover all of those in details, but it is some good reading if you've got some chance over the holidays. I know everybody's going to probably want to do that. So as I indicated, it's really broken up into three sections, and the first section is internal control matters as identified during the audit. So we perform a financial statement audit. We don't perform an internal control audit. But it's part of our audit required to understand and test the internal controls, and when matters come to our attention, if we determine there's a weakness in the system, we tailor our audit approach to make sure we address those weaknesses, and we get to a point where we're able to issue an unmodified opinion, as I had mentioned earlier. But in addition to that, if we come across anything that raises to a certain level, as described by the standards, we report it to this body at this time. So before I get into these items that are listed on pages 2 and 3, I do want to remind council, as I'm sure they're aware, this is for the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. During that time, there was a vacancy in that deputy treasurer position. So some of these items would be directly related to that vacancy. What I can say is, as we stand here today for the vacancy that was there and with the hiring of the new deputy treasurer at the time, I would say we were pretty excited that we were able to be before the city again at this time, because for the most part, this is when we normally would present to City Council. And if we look at opinion days or when the timing of when we normally completed the audit, the city was able to get their financial reporting together, to present it for the audit and the resulting modified opinion. So why don't you just keep that in mind as we go through the listed weaknesses and deficiencies that were identified. So on page 2, during page 2, halfway down the page, the weaknesses that were identified. So bank reconciliations were not performed on a timely basis during the time period that was indicated. So when bank statements aren't reconciling, it's an internal control item. You want to make sure that you can keep up on those on a timely basis. What we can say is eventually all the bank recs were completed, were updated, and we found nothing as a result of our testing on specifically on the June 30 balance that would have indicated there was anything inaccurate in those reconciliations. The second item, so during our census testing, as part of the year-end audit, there's actuarial liability calculations done for both your OPEB and your pension plans. So as part of that valuation, the city turns over certain, what we'll call census information. It really has to do with the individuals who are part of the plan, and that's how the liability is calculated. In the initial file that was turned over to the actuary, there were some employees that were included in the census data really weren't part of the plan. So I want to make sure I'm clear.
Can I stop you real
Yes.
quick? It's the paper in the back of the packet.
I'm sorry. There should be like a 19 or 20 page paper.
In the
Real
back of
thin
the
one?
audit book.
There you go.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So on the OPEB, what I want to be clear is the weakness is the data that was turned over for the actuarial liability number. It wasn't that you were inappropriately making benefit payments to folks who weren't entitled to the benefit. So it was just ensuring that for the next time we go through this, take another look, make sure that the folks that are turned over for the liability calculation are all indeed involved in the plan. As far as the deficiency is concerned, really this one was related to an accounts payable. So part of the cutoff testing that's done during close to the end of the year is we're making sure that payables that are due are essentially in the right time period. So a June service or a good that's received in June is recorded in the June time period, and in the July time period it needs to be in the next year. It can get a bit difficult when you're dealing with projects because they can tend to actually cross periods. So it's just a reminder here on those ones that do cross the period to take a look and make sure they get into the right time frame. The last one on page 3, I think you're all aware of this one. So during the review of the water and sewer rates, it was noted the rates are approved by City Council to take effect in July of 18. Actually didn't hit the billing system until May of 19. So, what does that mean? I mean, so what was actually billed was paid, and as a result of a shortage in the fund of about $45,000. So as Erin had indicated, in her working capital, the city could absorb that $45,000, and that adjustment, if needed, would be part of the next water and sewer rate study, and it would be adjusted accordingly. So really the control here is to ensure that once council improves the rates, that they get implemented into the utility billing system.
And let me just say this, and we made those comments here at the table that we needed to approve the new water rates, because if we don't, we may have to come back later and adjust the water rate. So we're all aware of that, and that's why there was, $45,000 shortage. But every year, we look at the water rate, whether we need to adjust it up or down, so.
Right.
We were all aware of that.
Okay. And then the second section really is a communication. You might recall prior to the start of the audit, I would have sent a letter out. We had talked with the mayor, and we had talked about risk and how we were going to identify, or what the riskier areas of the audit were, how we were going to address those, and gave actually each of you the opportunity to contact me if you had any concerns on any of the financial statement reporting or controls, and that we'd incorporate that as part of our audit. If there was anything that was significant that wouldn't have been included in Section 1, we'd be reporting it here. We've really nothing to report as a result of that initial communication. The only things that we're really talking about on pages 4 and 5 is about 2/3 of the way down the page. We discussed the city had implemented a new standard, GASB 88, which was required by GASB, so you appropriately had done that. And then I talked a little bit on page 5 already about the OPEB liability that needed to be restated as a result of the census data. Overall, I would say the condition of the books and records by the time we were ready to audit were really good. They were in really good shape. We were able to go through them, with the questions that we would normally have. But I think that this city council should feel pretty comfortable with the position that your finance department is in. We worked well with them. I think there's a good understanding of the standards and the reporting requirements, and I'd say we had a really good audit. As far as Section 3 is concerned on the legacy costs, we've touched on that a little bit, and I want to bring your attention on page 8. Because I know we've been talking about this from time to time, but you'll see that there's a chart that shows the funding percentage of the city's pension and the court's pension. OPEB at this point has not been pre-funded, it's just a liability, so that's why it's showing 0%. But you'll see that there's a dip in the funding percentage for both plans from 2017 to 2018. And why we use 2017 and 2018 as year in the MERS plans, and that plan year end is actually a December plan year end, so it's December 31st of 2017 and December 31st of 2018, and I think it's important to make that distinction. So all of us that might remember last December, I think this December today, the market either closed or reached a record high at the end of the day today. Last December, the market had taken a dive. So when you're looking at your funding percentage, it's really the actual determined liabilities compared to the assets that you have on deposit with MERS or the contributions that you made. Well, once that market went down and retreated, it brought down the fair market value of those investments. So timing's everything. So December 31st was the measuring date. It was measured at probably the lowest point in the last 2 or 3 years. Now, fast forward March, and I'll go quarters, March, June, September, now even December. Some of the estimates we'd see, and I know that the finance folks for the city could confirm this, is the expectation is the funding level as of December 31st, as long as it doesn't tank in the next 2 weeks, will probably exceed the levels that it was at 2017 and 16. So it was just market timing on that reduction. Other than that, I'd be happy. I mean, there's a lot of information here. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but I'd love to answer any questions you may have on anything we've covered or haven't covered this evening.
I think you covered it pretty good. And again, to summarize for the residents, all local governments are required to be audited every year by independent outside third party. And this is, we hire Plant Moran, and they come in. The city takes in a lot of revenue and a lot of expenditures. So they come in and look at all the financials to make sure that everything's on the up and up. For every dollar that we're taking in and every dollar we're spending, they look at credit cards, they look at everything. So this is always done by an independent outside company, and sounds like we're in good shape, and I appreciate the hard work you guys put into in advising us, on everything. But it looks good. Anybody else have anything? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, do you have anything else for your city manager report?
Yeah, Mayor, just in response to Mr. Murray's question a little bit, the CIP, we only spend if we have the money at that time. We don't have a set system where we put items in capital and say we're going to buy it no matter what. So it kind of controls, at least as the year goes on. The budget, as you recall from our last budget session a year ago, the budget before, some departments had capital within their budget, then there was another line item that was capital, which was mixed, different departments had different, it was tough to really follow. So this year, we made the change last spring during the budget session. This year, going into next year and the future, it's really broken out well that here's capital for police, here's capital for fire, and how it's broken out by equipment or technology or vehicles. It's broken out in 4 different sections. So it's much easier to follow. And our point generally was if the economy did take a dive or so, we can still focus our budget on having the lights turn on, employees, and doing every day's business. But we don't have to use the capital. That will be certainly part of the budget overall, but not something that we would touch until we know that the finances are straight, that we're able to do that. And it really is a split where capital is your infrastructure and your really special needs, as opposed to absolutely the least we can do. But a lot of governments do the least you can do, and then 10, 15 years later find that the world's crashed, and now they're looking for money to do things. So we certainly are judicial when it comes to separating the capital and understanding that we will only spend that when the money's there, and looking at forecasting, as Plant Moran helps us with. Over time, certainly we can look to see if things are at a slowdown mode, that we don't put ourselves in trouble. And I'm glad we were able to hear that tonight from Plant Moran of the position the city is in, because we've got a great future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Earl.
Thank you, Mayor. First, over the last year and a half or so, we've had to replace and purchase a lot of equipment in the city. And we did so diligently, thinking of what we had in the fund balance and budgetary. I'm very pleased to see that we did it. We replaced a significant amount of old antiquated equipment that was needed, and we did so without draining the funds, so I'm very happy with that. For the chili cook-off, I'm very impressed with $13,410. Is incredible. Thank you for all the workers, the volunteers, and everybody that comes out. That's a great event. It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest event we have going on, so everybody looks forward to it every year. To the Boyce family, I worked with Randy, so congratulations and thank you for everything you've done for the city for so long. And then to everybody, have a Merry Christmas, a happy and safe New Year, and please remember the workers that will be out there on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, keeping everybody safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Squires.
Yeah, just a few things. Thank you to the Boyce family for bringing joy to our community for so many years. Everybody appreciates it. And I want to give a shout out to AutoZone here in Garden City. I had a problem with my vehicle, and their customer service was outstanding. They replaced bulbs for me right before the council meeting, and I was able to get here on time. And then I want to wish a happy birthday to a longtime Garden City resident and personal friend of mine, Elaine Burton. She turned 97 years old on December 14th, and she's still going strong, and I'm very proud of her. And also, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you have safe holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacobs.
Just a couple things. Again, I was out there Friday singing carols at the Boyce family, and it was very nice. Nice weather, cooperated. And to tell you how small Garden City is, apparently my wife knows someone in your family from years ago. So you guys kind of separated, and she remembered it when we got home. So it seems like everybody comes back to Garden City. But other than that, DDA, great job with the chili cook-off, and Mr. Prosh with the update and information tonight. To Mr. Chason, welcome. I look forward to working with you. And to everybody, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and be safe.
Okay. Councilmember Kerwin.
I got to go with some ladies from the Senior Towers on a field trip to see the lights on Hines Drive. They were amazing. They are a feisty bunch, and they had us cracking up for the whole time. I think I had to plug my daughter's ears a couple times. They were great. I loved it. My family and I like to drive around the city and look at the lights, and of course, your house is one that we always stop at. And we've seen some really amazing houses, so you really should drive around and look. We found one that looks like right out of Clark Griswold, right from Family Vacation. It's amazing. We found a house that looks like a gingerbread house, and the guy built it all by hand. It was kind of neat. And then the ladies from the Senior Towers also gave me 2 bags of hat and gloves that they're donating to the Goodfellows, so Kim, I'll have to give those to you. And from my family to yours, we'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas and a safe and Happy New Year. And that's it.
Okay. Councilmember Lynch?
Just one comment for John when he asked about the capital 5-year plan. As some of us used to call it in the past, it's a wish list. It's all of the capital expenses that we wish we could afford to do for each department. And what we do year by year is prioritize, and according to the money that we have available, those are the things that get purchased and done, and the rest stay on the list so we don't forget about them for the next year and the following year. That's how we make sure that if things in the economy nosedive, then we just hold on tight until we can finally afford to do it. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that made an update. The DDA, the roads, the police department, very informative, and I think a lot of our residents were really happy to hear about that because they don't always know the inner workings of what's going on. But every single one of the reports was looking upward, showing us the good things that are happening in Garden City. So thank you for all of that. And I also was going to speak on the holiday decorations. The homes are beautiful in Garden City, all the lights, so many houses that are lit up. So definitely take a ride if you haven't already done that. And no matter what celebration, what holiday your family celebrates, no matter how big or how small, we wish you happy holidays, a very Merry Christmas, and a prosperous New Year. And that's all that I have.
Okay, Councilmember DeMichael.
I just want to thank the Boyce family again. I remember growing up and seeing like a carousel on your roof, and great memories. So thank you for doing that. It's wonderful. Also, I wanted to piggyback off of Ms. Lynch's items about the presentations. Where we've gone with roads has been wonderful, and then to see where we're going to be at the end of fiscal year next year. It's really exciting. There's definitely some areas that I've been concerned about that I see that are getting addressed next year. So that's great to hear. Great. Thank you, Chief. Great ordinance information. And the chili cook-off information was great. I appreciate the audit information as well. Can't wait to get that reading done over the holiday season. And from my family to yours, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to all. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you. Kudos to the DDA, and nice report out tonight. And anybody that went to the chili cook-off, the volunteers, Kim Dold and Teresa did a lot of the legwork. Everybody involved put $13,000 to Garden City Charities, and we should all be commended for that. It's a great thing for the city. It's a great event. It is one of our best events in the city. To the Boyce family, again, thank you. 60 years, that's phenomenal. And you've put a lot of smiles on a lot of residents' faces over the years. And you should be commended for that. And hope your family has a Merry Christmas. To Mr. Chason, welcome to Garden City. We're looking forward to working with you as our Parks and Rec Director. And to the residents, like I said, if we continue to fight blight and fix our roads, you'll get your money back. Everybody talks about their taxes going up, but when you sell your house and the property values are going up, you get some of that money back. So our auditor just told us our property taxes for Garden City went up $280,000 this year, and they're going to keep going up. We keep fixing the roads, fighting blight. Our property values are going to keep increasing, and down the road, when you retire or whenever you sell your house, you'll get a lot of that money back. So it's great news that our property values are going up. If you remember, we went through the recession and they were going the other way. So great things are happening in Garden City. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.